27 BC. The most powerful, most magnificent, and most populous empire on earth was established. A colossal power stretching from the entire shores of the Mediterranean, from the misty isles of Britain to the scorching deserts of Egypt. Rome, with its architects, engineers, roads, and laws, a civilization that shaped the entire world. But could this colossal power ever come to an end? How did this empire, which seemed to last forever, finally vanish? How did Rome collapse? Was it barbarian armies that brought down this vast empire? Or were crises rotten from within? It didn't all happen overnight. Rome slowly eroded under countless pressures from within and without. This collapse was a chain of events that fell like dominoes. Rome's greatness was also its burden. Once enriched by conquest and plunder, Rome began to shrink economically when its expansion stalled. New resources weren't arriving, and it was becoming increasingly difficult for the state to finance its massive army, bureaucracy, and infrastructure. As the empire expanded, taxes increased, but revenues decreased. The gold spent on armies to defend the borders was draining the treasury. The value of the currency plummeted, and inflation skyrocketed. Peasants were abandoning their land, and cities were impoverished. The people were crushed by heavy taxes. The Roman economy depended on slaves. As new conquests diminished, the slave supply also dwindled, and production plummeted. When the economic wheels stalled, the system gradually collapsed. Even the soldiers in the army were not receiving their salaries, and their loyalty was eroded. The once prosperous empire could no longer support its economic burden. Even a loaf of bread became a luxury for the wealthy. Historians refer to this period as the crisis of the 3rd century. In just 50 years, approximately 26 emperors ascended to the throne, and most were killed. This was a sign of instability. Realizing the empire's weakness, barbarian tribes intensified their attacks from the north and east. Rome's borders, especially in the north along the Rhine and Danube rivers, were under constant pressure. Germans, Goths, Vandals, Huns, all were seeking a better life, and Rome's borders were no longer as impenetrable as they once were. The internal chaos prevented Roman armies from mounting an effective defense. Under the Huns' pressure, Goths, Vandals, and other barbarian tribes invaded Roman territory. In 410, Alaric, king of the Visigoths, sacked Rome, ending the empire's immunity. It was a great shock for the city, which had remained untouched for 1,000 years. In 455, the Vandals sacked the city once more. Statues and temples were plundered. These attacks were not only material, but also psychologically devastating. Rome, the symbol of the empire's might, could no longer be defended. Attila, the legendary leader of the Huns, advanced to the gates of Rome. His armies ravaged Europe and made Rome tremble with fear. Border garrisons were weakened, legions were scattered by civil wars. Barbarians became not only warriors, but also an established threat. Some joined the Roman army, but this also brought disloyalty. Rome was left vulnerable to the peoples it had once conquered. Amidst this chaos, internal unrest erupted. The unrest within Rome was not merely economic. The imperial seat had become a life-or-death struggle. Within a century, more than 20 emperors ascended to the throne, and many were assassinated. Generals gathered their own armies and fought each other. These civil wars both depleted the empire's military strength and completely eroded popular confidence in the state. A state's greatest strength lies in its internal unity. When Rome lost this unity, it became more vulnerable to external threats. Civil war and Attila's raids eroded Rome from within. In 285, the empire was divided by Diocletian into two, Western and Eastern Rome. Eastern Rome was rich and powerful. Constantinople was like a fortress protected by its walls. But Western Rome was plagued by weak emperors, intrigues, and constant civil wars. Generals were deposing emperors and declaring themselves emperors. The Roman army was no longer composed of Roman citizens, but of mercenary barbarians, and these soldiers were selling their loyalty for money. There was no unity left at the heart of the empire. And finally, the year 476 arrived. The barbarian commander Odoacer, of Germanic origin, dethroned the Western Roman Emperor Romulus Augustulus. This meant the official end of Rome. Ironically, this last emperor's name also recalled Romulus, the founder of Rome, and the great emperor Augustus. But this time, it was not the beginning of Rome, but its end. Western Rome had officially ended. Things were different in the Eastern Roman Empire. The eastern capital, Constantinople, also known as Byzantium, would endure for another 1,000 years. But the final curtain had fallen on the West. An empire had vanished from the stage of history. The physical fall of Rome did not mean the end of a civilization. On the contrary, their legacy shaped the new world that rose from its ashes. Roman law laid the foundation for modern legal systems. Roman engineering, construction techniques, and roads are still used today. Latin became the foundation of many European languages, and perhaps most importantly, the rise and fall of Rome taught us invaluable lessons about how states survive and fall. It demonstrated that the strength of a civilization lies not only in its military, but also in its economy, social justice, and inner peace. The fall of Rome was not just the end of an empire, it was also a turning point in history. The gates of the Middle Ages opened, changing the fate of Europe. Rome fell, but its legacy remains with us. In fact, we live in a world built upon that legacy. And perhaps the most important question we must ask ourselves is, how will future historians recount the collapse of our civilization? Don't forget to subscribe to continue exploring the legends of Rome.